Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? Edgemans and a Job Community guys here today with another budget deck tech. So, today we're going to be taking a look at red and black aggro, otherwise known as Rakdos. And I decided I was going to put this deck together for all of you casual players, all of you guys that don't want to unload a ridiculous amount of money on Magic, and you can still have fun with a deck like this one. So we're going to break it down here today, but before we get to that, if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave that down in the comments below, and be sure to check out the playlist in the description below where I have all the previous decks that I've covered archived, both budget and non-budget decks. So, like any deck that we cover on this series here, we are going to be taking a look at the land base first. So, we're running 22 lands, starting off with Rakdos Guildgate. So it's going to come into the battlefield tapped, and it taps for either black or red mana to our mana pool. So we're going to have 4 of those, because it's a cheap alternative to the dual lands. But if you guys want to bust out some money for anything, I think the most important thing is to have a consistent mana base and to have the appropriate fixing. So going out and getting stuff like Dragon Skull Summits and Blood Crypts would be necessary for this deck to make it a little bit better. From there we have our mountains, so I believe we're running 10. So we'll break it off. 4. Another 4. And then just 2. So yeah, 10 mountains. And then we have 8 swamps. So 22 lands total. So it's a little bit under the normal amount of lands that you want to have in a regular Magic the Gathering deck for a constructed. Usually it's 24, but for this deck, because we're running a lot of really cheap cards and we're not using a whole lot of expensive spells, we can cut down the amount of lands that we're using and just use more creatures and other spells to just win the game faster. So from there, we're taking a look at our creatures, starting with the smallest converted mana cost and working our way up here. We have Rakdos Cackler, so he's a 1/1 for hybrid black or red mana, so you can pay either black or red, which is good. All we need is a land, and we're able to play him right off the bat. But he has Unleash, so he can enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, and if he has that counter, he can't block. But what we want to do with this deck is just outrace our opponent and just bash their face in. So we have 4 of the Rakdos Cackler here, so we're going to put him off to the side. From there, we have Rakdos Shred-Freak, so he's a 2/1 for double hybrid black or red mana, and he also has haste, which is always nice. So on turn 2, he can swing in. So if we go like turn 1 Rakdos Cackler, turn 2 Rakdos Shred-Freak, we can swing in turn 2 for 4 damage, which is pretty nice, pretty favorable. So we have a playset of the Shred-Freak. From there, we have Gore-House Chainwalker, so he's a 2/1 for 2 mana, 1 generic and 1 red, and he also has Unleash, so he can enter in with a +1/+1. If he has it, he can't block, but even still, he's essentially a 3/2 for 2 mana, which is pretty nice. The more aggro-ish creatures, the better for this deck. From there, we have Splatter Thug, so again, another creature with Unleash, and it's a 3 cost, 2 generic and 1 red. It's a 2/2 with first strike and then the Unleash, so it can be a 3/3 first strike, which is totally awesome, and it can just swing in. So essentially for the 3 mana, you get a 3/3 with first strike, so it makes it a little bit more resilient against other creatures whenever they're blocking. And if we can make the Splatter Thug even bigger, it's much more annoying for our opponent to have to deal with it. So we have a play set of Splatter Thug. We have our Hellhole Flailer here, so he's a 3/2 for 3 mana, 1 generic, 1 black, and 1 red. He also has Unleash, and he has an ability for 4 mana, 2 generic, 1 black, 1 red. Sacrifice him, and he deals damage equal to his power to target player. So if we have him Unleashed, we can swing in with him, and then right after, pay the 4 mana and sack him and deal even more damage to our opponent. And it's really nice, especially if he's coming in and attacking unanswered, and we're just able to pile on all the damage in total. So we have a playset of the Flailer as well. He's another very solid bodied creature, especially for that 3 mana. Alright, so from there we have Bloodfray Giant, so 4/3 for 4 mana, so double generic and then double red. He has Trample and he also has Unleash, so we're going very strong with the Unleash theme for this deck and the Unleash mechanic that Rakdos has, but he's another card that's really able-bodied. He's a 4/3 for 4, he can be a 5/4 for 4 with Trample, which is pretty huge. So even if our opponent's blocking with a bunch of like 1/1 creatures, he's going to be able to get that trample damage in there and get us to winning a lot quicker. So play set the Bloodfray Giant. So working away from our creatures, we have Rakdos Keyrune. So this is going to let us fix our mana a little bit. It's a 3-cost artifact, and it taps for either black or red to our mana pool. And then also for 1 black and 1 red, it can become a 3/1 black and red artifact creature with first strike, which is always nice. So if we end up getting board wipe by a card like Supreme Verdict or something like that, our Rakdos Keyrune can still stick around there, and we can have that swing in for us. But ultimately, it's a nice outlet for either mana fixing or just another creature for that 2 mana that we want to put into it. So we're going to put those down there. From there, we have Annihilating Fire. So it's a nice instant speed removal card that we have here. So for 3 mana, 1 generic and double red, it deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and if a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. So it's a nice versatile way of either having the removal for creatures or using this just as a direct burn on your opponent and just winning a little bit quicker. So 3 mana deals 3 damage. Pretty straightforward. From there, we have ways to buff up our creatures. So we have Deviant Glee, so it's a 1 black enchantment, and the enchanted creature gets +2/+1 and has for 1 red, the creature gains trample until the end of the turn, which is really nice. So we have a play set of it, and it works well with some of the creatures that we have here. Just makes them bigger, and it gives us the outlet to possibly give them trample if they don't already have trample, in the case of like Bloodfray Giant. And then we have 2 Pursuit of Flight, so even though this card is a Is-It card, it's still really good in this type of a deck because we can make our creatures a lot bigger. And even though we're not running the blue to give the creature flying, it's still good. For 2 mana, we can give a creature +2/+2. It's fairly solid, and it's like almost like we're running even more Deviant Glee, but it's a little bit more expensive and it doesn't have the trample, but even still, 2 more enchantments for giving a creature +2/+2, and it's 2 mana to play. So that is the main board that we have for the deck here. So now we're going to take a look at some of the budget sideboard options that we have. So we have Sewer Shambler. So this is against any players that are going to be playing with swamps. So it's a 2/1 for 3 mana, and it has Swamp Walk, and it also has Scavenge for 3 mana, so 2 generic and 1 black. But the biggest thing about it is with the Swamp Walk, if our opponent is playing with swamps, Sewer Shambler is unblockable, so we can swing in with some unanswered damage right there. If we can make him bigger with Deviant Glee or a Pursuit of Flight, we can just deal more damage that's unanswered. So it's an easy way against people that are playing with swamps to just kind of deal some really, really cheap damage there. From there, we have Electrickery, so it's a 1 red instant, and it deals 1 damage to target creature we don't control, and it has an overload for 1 generic and 1 red, so it deals 1 damage to each creature we don't control. And Electrickery is good because there are a lot of decks that'll play around a lot of really small creatures, so if we have the outlet to actually side it in, we can side in Electrickery and just deal with our opponent's small creatures, get rid of them all at once possibly, but more times than none, it can just deal 1 damage, get rid of a small creature that could be a nuisance or multiples. So, just 1 Electrickery in the sideboard. From there, we have Cremate, so this is against graveyard-based decks, anything that's trying to use stuff like on Burial Rites or even using the Scavenge that Golgari has. So we can exile a target card from a graveyard and draw a card, and it's for 1 black. So it's our nice little response to graveyard shenanigans, and we get to draw a card as well. So we have 3 of those. From there, we also have Rakdos Charm, so this is for a more kind of widespread graveyard hate. So it's 1 black and 1 red, and we get to choose 1, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, destroy target artifact, which could be fairly relevant. we can also have the Charm have each creature deal 1 damage to its controller. So if our opponent's playing off of just a huge amount of creatures, we can use the Charm and just have all of those creatures deal damage to our opponent, which could be nice. But we have 2 of the Charms in the sideboard. It's mainly for just getting rid of graveyards, a little bit more widespread than the Cremate can do. So we have that. We also have Traitorous Instinct. So Traitorous Instinct is nice because it's a sorcery that lets us take our opponent's stuff. So for 4 mana, we get to gain control of target creature until the end of the turn, untap that creature, and it gets +2/+0 and haste. So we're running a playset of this in the sideboard, and if our opponent's going to be playing a lot of really huge, bulky creatures, we can pay that 4 mana, just attack with their creature and attack with our creatures as well, and just have that alpha strike there. So running 4 Traitorous Instincts, and then we have our ultimate price as well. So this is the last card in our sideboard, and we have it as a playset as well. So it's another instant speed card for us, and it's a 1 generic and 1 black, destroy target monocolored creature. So it's a little bit specific, but at the same time, ultimate price is nice because it's just a really easy outlet to getting rid of creatures that are monocolored. So we have a playset of that as well. So that is the main board and the sideboard for this budget deck that we have here. Alongside that, I just wanted to mention some small cards that you guys can pick up if you're willing to just jump the barrier here of it being budget and just move into having some more expensive cards here. So even though it's not in Return to Ravnica, Dragonskull Summit would be good for mana fixing if you guys want to swap out some basic lands and put in some Dragonskull Summits. It would be a smart move. Also, Blood Crypt as well, which is in Return to Ravnica. You guys can swap out some basics for that as well. Mizium Mortars is another fairly good card. Deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control. Has an overload for 6 mana, 3 generic, and triple red. But ultimately, it's 1 generic and 1 red to deal 4 damage to a creature, which is pretty nice. We also have Dreadbore, which would be a good substitute to something like Ultimate Price in the sideboard or even in the main board somewhere. But destroy target creature or planeswalker for 1 black and 1 red. Always cool. And the last card that I wanted to mention is Rakdos Lord of Rats, which is a awesome big bulky creature. He's a 6/6 for 4 mana, double black and double red, and you can't cast him unless an opponent lost life this turn, which you have to swing in with one of your creatures or use a spell or something along those lines to deal damage. And then you can play him, but he's a 6/6 with flying and trample, and creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponent lost this turn. So those are some a little bit more expensive alternatives that you guys can swap in as you like for this deck and kind of make it a little bit better. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this deck. If you did, please be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content. And until next time, guys, have a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.